I do think that what's happening, though, is just something that has happened, at least from my experience, and why your club was seen as more dangerous than, say, the other. You mentioned that other political clubs have also invited controversial speakers, but they didn't receive the same, resistance that you guys have faced. And I remember this was like 4 or 5 years ago now, when we had started to do an event. It was at Harvard University. And it was an event that had free speech in the title. And the student union actually came back to us and said, oh, you can't use the word free speech. And we had, the editor Fleming Rose, who published the Muhammad cartoons, the Prophet Muhammad cartoons in the Danish newspaper. And he was there along with a free speech scholar and a journalist, Mustafa Akyol. And Harvard came back to us and said, you can't publish this event. The title free speech cannot be in the headline because it is a dog whistle to the alt-right. That was the reason that was given to us. And so we had to, kind of walk on eggshells and kind of reframe the whole event as like defending minorities within minority. It was like a really stupid, like, pretzel logic just to get free speech out of the title, because we were told that the word itself is a dog whistle. And I think that might be why your club is facing more resistance, because it's offering controversial speakers on a neutral platform versus you have, say, the YAF or a Republican club or something. It's like explicit what their ideology is. And I think there's this sense coming from the left that simply framing this as free speech and open debate is in fact platforming and privileging these viewpoints that, frankly, they just, would rather not get platformed at all. So, I mean, how would you respond to that if, like this kind of argument?
Well, I think my initial response is that the interesting thing about dog whistles is if you can hear it, that seems to say more about you. So that would be an initial thought. But I think, to the extent that we take those kinds of allegations seriously, which I think, for me personally, like with a grain of salt, you have to draw a line in the sand and say that you're not willing to give up certain pieces of language and whatnot just because some fringe group now says that it represents them. Like, okay, if they really want it to be some sort of dog whistle for them, sure, that's not what we're using it for. And it's not really our responsibility to police every last listener's interpretation of something. And it's, if you start going down that path, you're going to lose all of the linguistic tools you have and ways of describing things, because over time, fringe groups will just eat them up and say, well, that represents us and this represents us. And you'll have nothing left to be able to say anything.
Yeah, and I agree. I think in the idea of the word free speech, I think that's one thing we kind of contemplated a lot. And I'm really glad we ended up leaning into that term, because it is, it has its controversial connotations these days. And I think that's probably part of the reason we got rejected, is this idea that free speech is just an avenue for hate. But I think that's short-sighted. You look at, yes, people say hateful things, but in the long run, free speech it builds bridges. It makes people understand each other. It helps people get to know each other. If you, no matter how much you disagree with someone, I guarantee you, if you sit in a room with them and hash it out for 20 minutes, you're going to see the human on the other side. And I just think that's really important and something that's getting lost when we shut each other down and don't have these conversations.